most people don't realize that major life changes, like a marriage, a divorce, or birth of a child, how it affects their family and the dynamics and the legacy that they're creating for the future. So today, I am very proud to have with me a family law attorney to talk a little bit about how divorce can impact your casa, your familia, your legacy. I am attorney Alina Nunez, and you are here today with us on the podcast, Casa, Familia, and Legacy, where we talk a little bit about your family, your assets, roll them all into one, and how that is going to affect your legacy and the future. And today, I am happy to have here a colleague and friend of mine, Karen Parker. And Karen, if you can take a minute and introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Alina, and I'm honored to be here. Thank you for picking me as your family law practitioner to talk to your community. My name is Karen Parker. I am a civil and a family law practitioner here in Miami-Dade County and throughout the state of Florida. I've been practicing for over 20 years. I have my practices here in Miami-Dade in the Daytran 1 Center, where I focus on matters of civil, but also a major portion of my practice is involving family law, which oftentimes brings in the components of estate planning and probate matters.
So tell us a little bit about your background. What led you, I know you do commercial litigation, other types of litigation, the family law part of your practice. What led you to feel passionate about that and add that to your practice area?
Candidly, it
Yes.
was my own divorce. My own divorce from I have a son who is an attorney as well, but I divorced from his father during my first year of law school when he was 7. And it was an experience that I had never had, but going through that process myself and understanding and then taking that and evolving that over the years in my family law practitioner from what my experience was going through my own divorce and how I approach it with clients and dealing with their own divorce and children issues and assets and so on.
Of course, you've been in it. You know what it takes. You've lived through that experience. Similarly is my passion for why I do estate planning and probate. As I've mentioned in the podcast before, my father had Alzheimer's. Passed away eventually from Alzheimer's. My mom passed away from cancer. But I remember when my dad first started seeing signs and we started noticing signs of it, I had just graduated law school and he sat me down. He's like, you need to do whatever has to be done so that we knew where this disease was going because my grandmother, his mother had it and it runs in his side of the family. So he's like, I don't want your mother to have any issues to be able to manage things when I can no longer. So thanks to that, I was able to sit down and do his estate plan and get the powers of attorneys and everything in place so that once that disease progressed, my mom could make those decisions. So absolutely, I bring that passion as well as you do to your practice and to your clients. I think that's an invaluable thing. It's amazing that we've been in the trenches. We know what it takes to be in these types of situations. And I think that definitely contributes to your passion of being able to help people in these situations. So what are some of the biggest, you'd say, emotional factors in dealing with family law cases?
The hardest thing is when you have a husband and a wife. And it's not just necessarily limited to married people. We also have situations where people are not married, have been together for many, many years, and they have children. So what happens, though, is that the parents are divorcing, but you're not divorcing your children. So it becomes a very emotional ride for the children, depending on what their age is, and depending on how the parents have treated each other during this process, during the separation process. Have they been civil? Are they amicable? Do they just want to reach a resolution that's what's in the best interest of the children versus, I hate you, you can't be with my children anymore because you're no longer a good father just because I hate you and I don't want to be married to you anymore. And those emotional issues become forefront in children mental health issues as well.
Absolutely. I mean, when you have children, you're really going to be in that other person's life and they're going to be in your life forever. Because yes, people say, oh, well, once my kid becomes an adult is 18. No, I have a stepson that I raised since he was 3. And at his law school graduation, you know, his mom is there. The day he gets married, his mom will be there. And you have to try to develop that relationship so that the child doesn't suffer. They didn't ask to be put in that situation. So definitely, okay, so fun fact, Karen and I, you and I have been friends for over 20 years. We went to law school together. And I will say that in law school is when I realized that I did not want to practice family law. So I did a family law clinic. I forgot what professor was teaching at the time. And I had to go observe like a hearing or something as part of the clinic. And the attorney made like a really big mistake. And after the hearing was over, it was a relocation hearing. And the attorney for the husband made a big mistake. And so after the hearing, the judge takes us in and he's like, well, I couldn't judges have to remain impartial. So he's like, I couldn't tell the husband's attorney what he did wrong by letting in some evidence. So he had to grant the petition that the mom was trying to take the kid, relocate with the kid. And I remember sitting there going, if my error would ever cost my client to lose visitation, or now the visitation, the kid's going to North Florida. So instead of seeing them maybe every other week, I was like, I can't. So my hat's off to you, because family law is not an easy area of law to practice. And it ties into a lot of issues with the family and emotional and affects the dynamic.
Sure.
So with that being said, what is something that people often misunderstand about family law?
They misunderstand their rights and interests in, let's say, in the marriage itself, to property, to assets, to debts. One thing is the people think that if the property that was acquired during the marriage is only in one of those spouses' names, that it's their property and that you don't have access to it. And that is a misnomer. That is considered a marital asset. There are other situations also. Let's say you inherited something either before you got married or during the course of your marriage. That would be a non-marital asset, except if you commingle it in the marriage.
Ding, 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 ding. That is the number one concern, I would say, that I get when I do estate planning, where the parents are coming to me and we're sitting down, we're talking about, their assets and the day they pass away. They're like, okay, well, if I die, I want my daughter to inherit this from my son. And then I see this like look on their face. I'm like, I know what they're going to ask. They're like, well, but if my daughter inherits, does that mean that her husband also has a right to it? I'm like, well, it depends. If they commingle the asset, yes, it now becomes a marital asset. And if they were to get divorced, they could have rights. And also like, no. What can we do to protect from that happening? So that is a huge issue, even on the estate planning side, that we see often.
There are other things also that's important, that if you have accounts where you or your spouse are identified as a beneficiary or an account holder, under Florida law, that person it's an automatic revocation of their entitlement to inherit once you divorce. Final judgment is entered. However, you need to take those affirmative defense steps to change your documents, change your will, change your accounts, change your beneficiaries, just because the law says that, because it makes things so much easier in the end.
Oh, that was going to lead into my next question. So how important is it to prepare and plan before there are legal problems that arise, whether it is before getting married, or maybe even, I don't know if there's an examples that you can give while in the marriage, but finally coming to that decision of, I need a divorce. This has to end.
I am seeing quite often that there are spouses, and more often it's the wife, who is left in the dark during the marriage. Yeah. They are not aware of the financial issues in the home. They have no information about bank accounts or tax returns or creditors or ownership of properties. So when it comes down to, I can't live with this person, I want a divorce, but I don't know how to access a bank account to get money to hire a lawyer, I don't know anything.
Yep.
You need to make affirmative steps to find it.
Yeah.
To discover it, to learn about accessing those bank account records, to learn about accessing property records, corporation records. It's all marital. If it was all acquired and accumulated and increased in value during the course of the marriage, it's married. It's marital.
And it's not a matter of the person or the wife being chismosa. Okay, this is not being chismosa. This is informing yourself.
Sure.
And I've seen it. I remember I had a probate client of mine that she came in completely distraught. My heart broke for her. Her husband was perfectly fine. went out into the yard to do some gardening, and he had a heart attack. And it was totally unexpected, very much in the Hispanic community. The man's typically the one who kind of manages everything. She was clueless. So here she is sitting in front of me going, I just lost my husband. I have no idea. Who is even my mortgage company? Who do I pay my mortgage to? Where are my bank accounts? And she sat there and I'm like, well, you need to start going through papers and emails and this and that. And it is hard. It's hard when you feel kind of left in the dark and you have all this trust in this other person. Then all of a sudden they pull out the rug from under you. They're like, I want a divorce. I'm out of here. And you're like, what's going on?
I'm seeing that there is a rise in not only prenuptial agreements, but also postnuptial agreements once you get into the marriage, because there is concerns. Obviously, nobody wants to go into a marriage thinking it's going to end, but there are concerns. And one of the things that's very important that I'm finding as a family law practitioner is to coordinate efforts with a trust attorney like you, with a probate attorney like you, to make sure that those pre and postnuptial agreements are consistent with those trust documents.
Absolutely.
And that there are no ambiguities.
Absolutely. People don't realize how interconnected a lot of our practice areas are. I don't do family law at all, but I often have to collaborate with family law attorneys like yourself exactly with that. They come to me and they're like, oh, my daughter's going to get married or my son's going to get married. You know, I want to set up a trust for them and put some money. Well, then we need a prenup. If your concern is that you're already creating this trust or you're already putting an asset in for that child, then there needs to be a prenup established if your main concern is you don't want that spouse in a case of a divorce to be able to get to it. Or if they've already married and they're like, well, then there needs to be postnups or waiver of spousal rights as to homestead property. And it ties very much into family law issues because, again, our greatest assets are casa. That's our home, our property. That's our legacy, what we create. And we need to protect that with proper estate planning and proper family law planning.
There's other things also besides property, and there's things like pensions,
yes,
401k,
absolutely,
and depending on who is named as a beneficiary. But if that 401k or that pension accumulated during the course of the marriage, that spouse is entitled to a percentage of that, but they don't get it until the person retires.
Yes.
And what happens if they die? These are all things that have to be contemplated in probate and trust matters, in addition to resolving a family law matter.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so going into some of our questions, so why is it so important to update estate planning documents or beneficiaries on those types of pensions or things like that after a major life change like a divorce? So once someone gets divorced and you represent them like, okay, I'm done, I'm divorced. No, there's still work that needs to be done on a personal level in regards to their assets, right?
Right. So let's say you have a trust for your kids, and it was a trust that you put together with your spouse at the time, and now you're divorcing. The question is, do you want that spouse to be the trustee to govern how the money is spent for the benefit of your beneficiary children? The answer is no. The answer is, I'm divorced now. I don't want that person to have anything to do with my money. So you need to make the conscious decision of appointing the proper person to act as a trustee or even a guardian for the children over their property and their person.
Absolutely. And oftentimes people forget, or let's say they have a spouse named as a beneficiary on an account or, some investment account or bank account, and they forget. You need to change those things. You need to make that conscious effort once that divorce is finalized to then go through and make those changes. Just simply that final judgment of dissolution of marriage is not going to simply change that for you. You need to go change it. Have you ever had, and I know I have had, not in a family law, but in probate, have you ever had a situation where one of the spouses dies during the divorce process, but before that final judgment is entered?
Yes. And it is a very difficult highway to navigate because in Florida, once you file a petition for dissolution before final judgment is entered, that establishes the fine line of how to separate marital assets from non-marital assets.
Yeah.
Now, given you're not officially divorced,
correct,
your marriage is not officially dissolved. So what does that do? It effectively renders your divorce proceedings moot.
Yep.
And therefore, whatever you wanted as the spouse who passed away to, as far as how the children were going to get money or any other issues, that all just ended, and the remaining spouse is now in control of everything.
Yeah. And that has happened, people. I have been involved on the probate side where in the middle of a divorce proceeding, it wasn't finalized. And like I said, unfortunately, until that judge doesn't sign that final judgment, no matter how much you hate that other person, you're still legally married. Or even in real estate, we've had closings where they think, oh, well, we've been separated for 5 years. We don't talk. He moved out. But did you get legally divorced? Well, no. Well, then guess what? You're married and you're selling this house. He can have a potential right to it. And it's you can't just leave those loose ends like that. So what would you say in your experience with family law, would you say are the situations that create the biggest like legal complications for family later on?
Not planning ahead. When a couple is divorcing and ultimately reaches a resolution with a marital settlement agreement, that's your contract. That's going to provide what your obligations are, not only to each other, not only as to separating and distributing the assets and the debts, but also how to deal with the children, child support, time sharing, custody matters. Yeah. What's not included in marital settlement agreements are guardianships in case both of those parents pass away.
True.
How do you deal with the children after all of that happens? And those are very difficult situations. A lot of people go in there and again, they're very angry and they're very bitter, mm-hmm. and they don't, and they don't understand. Let's get you to a soft landing. And that's what I try to do. I try to help them navigate to that and get past the anger and the bitter and get to a resolution.
Yeah. Save the anger for the divorce party with your girlfriends or your guy friends. Go to Vegas or take a cruise to the Bahamas and celebrate and create, whatever. And just, save the anger for then so you can party. But I definitely agree. And that's why family law, it is such an important, and more, unfortunately, we see people going through divorces. And like you said, nobody goes into a marriage wanting to get divorced, but unfortunately it happens. But planning, you got to plan, and you got to, especially if you have children, I definitely think having, as we say, the best interest of the child.
And that's tantamount. And that's what the court is only concerned about.
Yeah.
Yes, the court wants to do equity and distribute the assets and the debts. They don't care. We are a no-fault state, so they don't care if you had an affair.
Yeah.
That really has no bearing unless you use that affair and you wasted marital assets.
Exactly.
That's when it plays a part.
So ladies, or gentlemen, because it can happen both ways, and I'm going to be sexist here, that's when it's important to go do that digging and see those credit card statements and what was money being spent on. Because yes, having an affair it has no basis in a divorce. So, but spending marital assets does. So what conversations do families avoid that they really should be having when it comes to family law? And it doesn't have to be that necessarily a conversation of divorce, but even let's say parents with their children, or parents with grown children that are now going to start their own marriage. What would you say are maybe some of these conversations that families are avoiding or not having?
They're avoiding the necessity to maintain civility between the families. The parents are divorcing. And of course, the parents come with friends and family and so on. The kids are in the middle. And the kids have rights in the state of Florida. The Florida Supreme Court promulgates certain rights and entitlements that children get. For example, parents can't talk bad about the other parent in front of that child or those children. They can't use the children as messengers to the other parent. But even more so, they have to communicate that to their friends and family.
Yeah.
Don't talk bad about the other spouse. Don't use the children as a go-between to try to say, oh, well, your mother's doing this or your father's doing that. Those are very, very critical issues, and those become very emotional. And then what ends up happening, the children don't know who to turn to. They start falling behind in school. They start having mental health issues. They start having, physical accidents and such. And I've seen it. And then the court have to intervene. We have to appoint a guardian ad litem, and just it's expensive and difficult, and it's unnecessary.
Question for you, and this is one that you hear and you see. Do abuelo and abuela have any rights?
Very, very good. That was a paper I wrote in law school. That was my writing requirement in law school. And because I was going through my divorce in my first year of law school, I focused on that. Now, Florida has a law that is still on the books gives grandparents rights of visitation or rights of custody. However, it has been deemed unconstitutional, and it violates a parent's rights to privacy, a parent's rights to raise their children as they seem fit. The drawback, the exception is if the grandparents can make a presentation that a particular parent is unfit. Mm-hmm. They're in jail, the other parent's in rehab or whatever, and those parents are unfit. They can petition the court, and only in those circumstances, and it's a very high threshold to meet for a grandparent to have exercise any kind of rights to custody or time sharing with the children. My concern when I wrote the paper was if something happened to me with my son, mm-hmm. my son's father would make sure that my parents never saw my child.
Exactly.
That's just the bitter truth of it.
Yeah. And that's what I'm sure a lot of families have that concern. Or, being raised in a Hispanic culture, we tend to live with our parents in our same home. You're very close, you're very close with your parents. You're very united. And to have that child torn out and not see, those grandparents that were there as much as the parents is a harsh reality. I know sometimes people get frustrated, like, oh, but, my grandmother, my mother, my father is helping me raise my son. Unfortunately, yes, but the parents are the ones with the primary responsibility.
Absolutely.
So wonderful.
It is important, though, just as a caveat to that, it is important as you as a parent that if something were to happen to you, that you have made your wishes known about what you want for your children, that you want to make sure that your parents have access to your children and that the other parent doesn't try to take those children away from those grandparents or anybody else in an extended family situation. Make your wishes known. And that's where you come in.
Absolutely. And we do when we sit down. And I know, again, it's not a fun topic to talk about, dying or if something like that were to happen, but the importance, especially with minor children, because once they're 18, they're considered adults. They can go pick and see who they want to, live with or visit. We do designations of pre-need guardian in a situation where a parent maybe, either passed away or is incapacitated and can't care for that child, where they're saying, if this ever to happen to me, this is who I want to care for my child, versus leaving that decision up to the court. The court, like I tell my clients, the court doesn't know your values. The court doesn't know your beliefs and how you want your child to be brought up and raised, whether you want them to go to a private school, a public school, a non-denominational church, or a specific type of church or religion that they want to practice. You know that. So you need to plan for that. Because if you don't plan, the court's just going to go, okay, well, this is what we have and this is what we're going to do. So awesome. Well, let's go through and we're going to do a couple of what we call rapid fire questions. And these are questions that we find that people ask all the time. People want to know the answers to. So we try to put these out there for them. So should someone update their will, their estate planning after a divorce? I think we covered it a little bit, but should someone do that after their divorce?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's critical that people know what your wishes are as it relates to your assets, to whatever your debts are, but also even more so when there are children involved.
Yeah. We got to take that X out of there. X has to go out of all of those documents. All right. What is one mistake parents make when it comes to protecting their children legally?
They try to keep the children away from the other parent. They try to self-help. They think that if they find out that a parent took the child to Disney World and didn't tell them ahead of time. Now, the caveat to that is courts encourage parents. It's called shared parental responsibility. And it is a presumption in the state of Florida that both parents have equal access to the children, but both parents have a right to know what's going on with the children when they are with the other parent. So if you plan a drive from Miami to Orlando and you're going to spend the weekend with the kids on your time sharing weekend, you're still taking them out of the jurisdiction.
Absolutely.
Let the other parent know.
Yeah, just courtesy.
Let the other parent know. It's not a big deal. There are programs, there are formats. If you can't get along on text, there are programs like Talking Parents or Our Family Wizard where the court actually has access to these applications and they maintain the text messaging between the parents so they can tell, not that they look at it all the time, what the attitudes are, what the tones are. You can even exchange expenses, uncovered medical expenses that both parents are responsible for sharing.
That's awesome.
These applications are available. I encourage my clients. We actually get court orders requiring the parents to communicate through these applications.
That is great. That is really great. I did not know that. And definitely communication is key, especially when there's a child involved. communication is key. So that's great that there are those tools that can be used, and the court is kind of keeping an eye on it to make sure everybody's just getting along and not doing things that they shouldn't do, you know? All right. So can family disputes or divorces affect inherited property?
Yes, we talked about that, and that goes back to the commingling. For example, if it's something that was inherited prior to the marriage, it's already deemed a non-marital asset. But if it's something, and it doesn't matter if it was prior to the marriage or even during the course of the marriage. But let's say you take that property and you turn around and refinance it. You're married. Any mortgage documents, any loan documents are going to reflect that you're married. The banks and the lenders may require that your spouse be on those loan documents. And if you take those monies from that refinancing or that loan and you use it for the benefit of the marriage, you have now just commingled that asset into the marriage, and you have now made it a marital asset, and it lost its non-marital characteristic.
Along those lines, I'm going to throw out a situation or a question to you that I face a lot from the estate planning side. I want to hear your perspective. If you have a client that comes to you and says, Karen, I want to get divorced. I want you to represent me. I'm assuming you sit down, you go through, okay, what are the assets? Are there children? If they say, oh, no, but this house, no. This house, I bought it before I got married. Mm-hmm. This house was mine. I've owned it for 10 years and it's only my title. So that doesn't need to be included. How do you respond to that?
I will tell them they are mistaken. Okay. Now, yes, it maintains its characteristic as a non-marital asset as long as it was that none of the assets of that house were commingled. However, the passive appreciation of the value of that home that occurred from the time you married to the time you file your petition for dissolution is subject to equitable distribution. If the other spouse contributed to the maintenance of the property, whether they mowed the yard or changed the AC filters or helped remodel the bathroom, they have increased the value of that property. They are entitled to a percentage, 50% of the passive appreciation of that house.
Yep. So what that means is from the moment you got married, whatever the value of that house was up until the time of the divorce, that appreciation in value, that is what we're discussing. They could potentially have an interest. And the same thing happens to me in estate planning and even in probate. I remember I had a case where the lady owned the property for many years before getting remarried. She was remarried not for a very long time, maybe 2 or 3 years. She did a will, and we're going to touch briefly upon that because we're getting towards the end with un notario. And they said, no, but this house is for the kids, adult kids. You know, I'm saying kids, but they're adult children. And when it came time to do the probate, I'm like, that provision in the will is not valid because yes, it was an asset prior, but there's no prenup. There's nothing that spouse is waiving those rights to it. So he has a potential interest in it by way of the probate. And they were just sitting there like dumbfounded. I'm like, unfortunately, this is why you don't go to un notario to have your documents done. So that's my next question to you. How do you deal with people who come to you say, I want to get divorced. I don't have money. Can I just use like self-help or what can I do? How do you deal with those situations?
There are programs out there. The Miami-Dade County has forms available. They have self-help offices available. But unless you have an experienced practitioner who can help you navigate a divorce, even if it's just a marriage with no children, but you've been married, let's say in excess of 10 years. Our alimony laws have changed in this state. There is no more permanent alimony, but there is alimony of a durational period based on the length of the marriage. If you don't have any assets because you never owned a home together, but yet one party makes more than the other one, then you may be looking at a presumption of entitlement for spousal support. These are all things that have to be taken into consideration. If you think you're going in there with a simple divorce and then everybody just walks away, you're sadly mistaken. And you make a mistake like that, it could cost you a lot of money. Find friends, find family to help you get some money put together. There are practitioners out there like myself. I will take somebody at a discounted rate if I know that they're in a difficult situation. And I don't walk away. I don't, withdraw because you don't have any more money.
Yeah.
I will stick it out with you just to make sure that you're doing the right thing and your rights are protected.
Absolutely. And as my father would say, lo barato sale caro. And these are important milestones in your life. And you should not just be cutting corners and doing self-help. So Thank you so much, Karen, for being here today. Please, for anyone that's listening and watching us who wants to connect with you, who wants to learn more about your work and what you do and possibly represent them, how can they get a hold of you?
Sure. My law office is at the Daytran One Center, which is 9100 South Dayland Boulevard. You can reach me by email at kparker@kbparkerlaw.com. My website is under construction right now, but be on the lookout. It will soon be made available and available on social media. I am on Facebook, and I'm here to provide assistance. And, just for the simple divorce or the very difficult divorce, I can help everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you all for listening and for watching and tuning in to Casa, Familia, and Legacy, where it all intersects and comes together. And we're here to help you protect your future and protect your legacy.